really excited that we can have some people from all over the world today. I know this, if you've been following our Campfire sessions, this one's at a bit of a different time because we wanted to enable teachers from Asia to join as well. Sorry for that noise, especially since world languages is pretty pertinent for, all of the international schools within our community. Yeah, let me go ahead and start sharing my screen. But yes, thank you for coming to this session specifically on using Flint in world language classrooms. So today I'll first start off with what we like to call icebreakers. Basically, I'll share like sometimes a hot take, sometimes just like a new update in the AI world that is relevant to like this group, and we can discuss it for a little bit, kind of get the gears grinding about how AI plays a role in teaching and especially for world languages. And then I'll show you a quick demo about how to set up an activity, also show you like what it looks like from the student's end and some example ideas and use cases for using Flint in your classroom. And then I'll give you some more specific tips on the setup process. So like key features to keep in mind and notes about prompting tips. And then at the end, we'll have time for people to share what they've been trying, maybe even what like roadblocks they're falling into or what things that they want to like pick other people's brains for. I know we have a lot of like variety and experience on the call here today, so would love to leverage that, get the people who have been, using Flint a bit to help out the people who might be just getting started. Yeah, and I'll pause for questions in between each of these sections. But yeah, housekeeping things. The recording will be available later. For everyone who registered, I'll send it out directly to the registrants through email. And it'll also be in our newsletter later on in the week, I believe. And questions are welcome at any time. Feel free to interrupt me. I'll have like designated time for questions, but if there's something relevant in the moment, feel free to ask it. I want to make this as interactive as possible. But great. Okay, all of that out of the way. The icebreaking news for today is this Washington Post article that I saw with kind of a polarizing headline, I would say, basically saying that AI could cause a mass extinction of languages and ways of thinking. And so I like took this excerpt from the article that hopefully kind of what this person was trying to say. The article was from almost 2 years ago, so keeping that in mind. They're saying that the most powerful AI models are trained on high resource languages, right? So ones that have a lot of written content about them, especially out on the internet. And the argument that they're saying is because those models will become dominant models, they will in turn churn out amounts of new text in those languages. And they compare it to an invasive where these dominant models could drive out languages with fewer resources that exist for training. Yeah, and like they talk about the concept of how some languages are already kind of endangered because of globalization, migration, cultural homogenization. And so LLMs might increase this dramatically. Yeah, so I'd love to open up the conversation. Are there any like initial reactions to this thinking that you all have?
Guess everyone's pretty shy today, Lulu.
That's okay. I will say, when I was looking into this, because I was personally pretty interested in it, I saw that Meta had started a project, what they're calling No Language Left Behind. And so they're trying to like find resources for every language on the planet and like create models based in those languages. Yeah, so I think that's a pretty take on it. Yeah, I guess, does anyone also have any thoughts on like how this will impact your own class? Oh, go ahead, Carolyn. Oh,
well, it is. Hi, everyone. It is also opposed to the idea. I don't think they will be. We will have fewer languages, or the importance of learning a language will be diminish, because on the other hand, science says the learning a language or other languages will help you or shield you from cognitive decline. So that's what we're continuously saying in our schools, that it is helpful for culture, for getting to know other places, but also because of the health of your brain. So there you go.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I think like where teaching plays a role in all of this is to, convince students the importance of this and like really show them the joy almost of learning a language and how it benefits themselves. And I think that's like kind of an analogy almost for AI as well. Like, students when they see AI at first, they're like, "Oh, this is going to make my life so much easier." But there's a lot of ways that students can use AI to benefit their learning. And so like in the same way that like learning a language can benefit them, like we want also for AI to benefit them. Yeah, Karina?
So in the, going off of what they're saying, that AI will churn out massive amounts of language at the same time, it's also exciting to think of AI facilitating, these languages that it's hard for us to get to because we don't know anybody who speaks, for example, Quechua or, et cetera. And the AI might make that accessible to us and our students. So we might be able to use AI to our advantage and show them what it sounds like to not speak only Spanish, but Quechua or other languages. So that there's that angle as well.
Yeah, I really like that. That's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I know like I've been working with some Latin teachers and you don't speak Latin in class necessarily, but they're able to Flint is still able to like understand Latin and like help students with all of the various things that you would be learning in a Latin class. So yeah, hopefully with better models and more specialized models as well. Yeah, those are things that we can definitely enable for future generations. Great. Awesome. Great takes. I will just jump into the next section so that we have time at the end for everyone to share things as well. But essentially, for setting up a language activity in Flint, I'm going to switch over to first show you the student view. Should have updated that screenshot. But so here's an example of an activity that I created earlier where students are practicing ordering tapas in a Spanish restaurant, specifically in Sevilla. So yeah, they'll be using like the Spain Spanish accent. And when students go into Flint, honestly, the world languages departments at the schools that we've been working with have been some of the most avid lovers and users of Flint. I don't know if this is like what you all are seeing at your school, but I will just say from like a general broad perspective, we've seen a lot of language teachers really like how each student can have individualized conversations in Flint, and each student is getting a whole bunch of practice. So yeah, so when students come into Flint, you as the teacher will see all of the sessions that they've been having, and they can start individual sessions with the activity. And then let me click into this example here. But essentially, when the students are having the conversation, they can go back and forth. They can, oh, this might be a better way.
Hola, soy María.
They can go back and forth with the AI, have a conversation. Flint can talk to them, as you kind of heard a sneak peek of just now. They can talk to Flint as well. You can upload additional resources, websites, links, what have you. So there's a lot of different ways of interacting within this conversation. And the perk of all of it is that students are getting that individualized practice, and they also get feedback at the end of when they've completed their activity. So here we see an example of like the strengths, areas of improvement, and follow-up that have been shown for this specific session. Students will get this at the end. You can also see it at the end, how the AI has responded to them. But yeah, and then you as the teacher can see the entire conversation as well. And if you do have it as a spoken activity, You can even go back and listen to how the student spoke. So here I can listen to this one right here.
Olá, puedo tomar queso manchego?
So yeah, you can go back and listen to how each student actually spoke, what the pronunciation was like, cadence of speech, all of that. Yeah, so that's kind of like what the student experience looks like. They can interact with these one-on-one activities that you set up as a teacher, and you can specify if you want it to be like spoken, written, what topic, how much help the students get, and all of that. And I'll show you right now how to do that. But any questions about the student experience?
Is there a limit to the amount of sessions that are recorded per student?
No. Yeah, students can go in, they can create more and more sessions. So sometimes we see teachers set up an activity as like a one-time thing, and if you don't want students to go back to it, you can like set a deadline on it or something like that. But oftentimes teachers will create an activity and then say, hey, if you want to use this to review for like the quiz later on, or the end of your assessment, feel free to go back to any of the activities from before. And if you organize all of your activities into that class group for the student, they'll be able to see everything that has been shared with them and what's available for use. Yeah, go ahead, Sandra.
Yes, I have a question. I set up an activity for my grade 12 students of Ab Inicio, and I provided a bunch of questions so that Flint could ask these questions to the students. So I want them to practice many times. So if let's say that they create a session now and they do a set of activities with a set of questions, the second time when they come back to practice again, would they get other questions? I mean, I have given enough questions for Flint to sort of recycle, not recycle, but use different questions every time.
I see. Yeah. So when the students start a second session, Flint doesn't know about the session that they had before, unfortunately. So if they go back, they might be asked the same questions. You could tell students to just tell Flint, like, I already answered that question, give me another one. And then Flint will create more questions for them.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question too. What happened in the case the students start to have a dissection and type something is not adequate with whatever we're talking? Something like, they're not supposed to do it. Then what happened in that case?
Yeah. So I think it depends on how severe it is and how much guidelines you've put in. So if it's anything that's like inappropriate for school or something like that, Flint automatically flags those messages and will not engage with it. But if the student is asking like a curious question that's somewhat tied to the topic, then Flint will probably answer their questions. Yeah, so it kind of depends on the severity, I would say. And then you also can give more guidance on how you want Flint to respond in situations like that. So you could tell Flint, like, never go off topic, just stick with what the students are currently talking about. Or you can say, like, answer 1 to 2 questions that is like kind of related, but make sure that most of the conversation stays on topic. So yeah, I would say like if you want to specify the activity there, then you would need to do that in the guidelines.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Sophie.
Hi, Lulu. Nice to see you finally online.
Yeah.
This is not quite a question, but like a observation I would like to share. I would say like Flint has been already doing very well in identifying the errors students have in word choices and grammar mistakes, like when they practice Chinese. So my observation recently is like based on what you just shared, like I want to do an oral practice, which means I want the Flint to be able to also help students with their pronunciation. So in Chinese we have 4 tones, right? In Mandarin Chinese we have 4 tones, but when my students like when they pronounce inappropriate tones. I think currently the Flint is super smart to actually autocorrect their tone mistakes. So when I like see the text of what they just like spoke to Flint, they are all incorrect characters, which means even though they pronounced wrong, but Flint was able to make it correct and find the correct characters. So I hope in the future, like Flint could upgrade to another level, which makes it able to interact and provide feedback to the tone mistakes too.
Yeah. Thank you, Sophie. Yeah. I think the way that it currently works is that it transcribes the
Yeah.
talking, and then it uses that transcription, so it loses the tones and some of the pronunciation. Sometimes, yeah, you can see like through the recording, like, oh, the student didn't quite say this right, but Flint kind of just ignores it and moves on. I think sometimes you could ask Flint to give feedback more specifically on pronunciation. I don't think it would like do a super good job, unfortunately. But it would probably, if there are things that the transcription does catch, then it can comment on that, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, I agree. I think eventually once we have like fully multimodal AI models, meaning like AI models that are trained on not just text, but also video, audio, images even, then Flint will Flint will be able to do that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anthony?
Yeah, hi. My question is a little bit similar, I guess, or in the same area. I was just wondering, how do they pick up accents? Because obviously our students have accents. How accurate is it? Because I've been playing with it, but my students haven't really. We're preparing internal assessments for the IB in French, and yeah, some of them played around with it, and I'm not sure it's super consistent depending on the kind of accent that they have. So I was just wondering, like, what's the, not technology, but what's the idea behind it?
Yeah, I can show you this a little bit more specifically in a sec. I guess, are you talking about like accents or more like dialects? Is it like the student doesn't
No,
have
I mean, like, obviously they're going to speak with, like, my question is Flint, for example, able to pick up native French, but French spoken by an Anglophone or someone who comes from a different part of the world? Will Flint be able to recognize it and still have that conversation with the student?
Yeah. Okay, yeah. From what I've seen, Flint is pretty good about that. Because also like if you're in an activity and like the activity didn't specify to like allow English necessarily, if the student speaks in English, Flint still understands it. Flint might not respond in English because that's not what it was told to do. But Flint would be able to understand that language. So I think as long as like the student is speaking clearly, Flint is pretty good at picking up on different accents and dialects and stuff. But we do have the option to add like, for example, I think for French we have like Canadian French and then like French from France. So you could add that as a secondary language if you want to be extra sure that Flint will pick up on that. Yeah. And then just in the interest of time, I'll really quickly respond to Dion's comment. But he said, I created a language tutor for learning Korean and Flint continued to speak any English sentences with a strong Korean accent. Is there a way to address this issue? I'm not sure if it does this in other languages as well when creating language tutors. Yeah, this is a issue that we are aware of. It's kind of really strange actually, where Flint will like, because it's combining like English and the foreign language for students to be able to understand it better. But it's not able to like switch the actual text to speech model. So it does say the English in a heavy accent. I haven't found a great solution for this yet, but it is something that our engineers are aware of and will look into. And once we figure out a way to fix it, we'll let you all know. But yeah, so really quickly, I will show you all how to create an activity like this, just to level set with everyone. Yeah, so for those of you who haven't seen Flint yet, this is what it can look like. you have either the option to create a custom activity. So if you know exactly what you want to tell Flint to make for you, that's a great option to go into. But we also have the shortcuts at the top here where you could start off with a certain type of activity. I'll just pick world language speaking here. And then what this will do is send the first initial message so that it gives Flint some context on what I want it to create. And then here Flint will start to ask me questions on the context of what I want to make, the context of my students, and it'll ask more and more questions until it feels like it has enough of an idea to create something for me to start trying out. So yeah, here it's like starting off with what language will they be practicing and what level of proficiency are they at, and then also any specific topics that I want them to do. So I could say something like, my 6th grade students are just starting to learn Spanish. They're at an actual level novice. I don't know any specific activity ideas though. Can you help me brainstorm some? So I'm kind of telling it, hey, they're 6th graders in terms of age, but also like the language proficiency is at actual level novice. So you can specify both of those, because a 6th grader starting to learn Spanish versus like a 10th grader starting to learn Spanish, you might want the content and the sophistication of the activity to be kind of different, right? But here it actually brainstormed a Spanish self-introduction dialogue, perfect for beginners. And here we could try it out and see if we like it. Or I can even use Flint as like a brainstorming partner and say something like, can you brainstorm some other activity ideas? And then it should give me a list of different options. Yeah, so here it's saying we could do a house tour where the students are describing their house, the rooms, the furniture, a restaurant role play, weather reporter, family tree talk, daily routine. Yeah, so I think some of the perk of using this Build with Flint chat is that not only is it helping you actually build the activity, but it can also help you brainstorm the whole concept behind the activity. I could ask it to change it to something else, and it will do all of that for me. Yeah, and so in here, that's where I would like request any edits, give it more ideas, kind of act as a brainstorming partner with it. And then on this right-hand side is the preview. So we can start this session manually, type in messages, see how it responds. Yeah, earlier with the question about like what happens if students are just kind of goofing around, you could try it out here and then see how Flint would respond to them. But also you can simulate a preview based on the grading rubric. So if you want to see like what a good response is, or an excellent or developing one here, you can click on one of those, and then Flint will play both its own role and the student's role and give you a mock conversation really quickly, so you can see what the expectations are, how it might look, and then based on that you can make additional changes as you see fit. Yeah, any other question or any questions about this building process? Yeah, Neil? Oh. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, can you input specific vocabulary that you would like it to employ?
Yes, yeah. So actually, very good question. I forgot to mention that. Down here, you can add any documents or images, website, articles, links, even take a picture, but I would probably not suggest that necessarily for vocabulary. But yeah, you can upload your own content or content from the web, and Flint will be able to pull that into its data to pull from. And actually, I heavily recommend that teachers do this actually, because Flint is trained to know that any content that you're giving it is kind of like cherry-picked content, right? So it will reference that first before using the rest of its training data. So if you wanted to like use specific vocabulary for this topic, then it will stick to that until like students like ask beyond that. Yeah. Gabriella?
Hi.
Oh.
So a couple of things I want to ask. One, can we set it up that's just either writing only or speaking only activity? And the other thing, are we going to go over like how to, the setup? No English, no, like you said, no, don't go off topics. Are you going to go over like how to do that and add as many, limitations and setting it up for what you want?
Yeah. That's a great question. That's actually the very next section. So I'll dive into it a bit more deeply then, but I think the short answer is yes for all of us.
Perfect.
Go ahead, Sandra.
Yes, I have a question. Every time, not every time, but sometimes when I am building an activity, I notice that after a certain amount of interaction with Flint, it runs out of memory or something, and it tells me that it has limitations. And sometimes I honestly need to try if this video is good, or if this document is good, or the instructions, or Flint is not doing what I want, and so I keep adding and adding, but then it seems like I ran out of memory, or he does, or she, and then I have to start a new activity with what I know. So I wonder if at one point that's not going to happen, or if there's going to be unlimited memory.
Yeah, that's a good question. That is definitely something that we as a team are also struggling with. It's like the nature of models right now. But I'm trying to think of the exact numbers. I know we were able to increase the memory by 10x like a couple months ago, simply because AI models are getting better, and so we were able to plug a better AI model into Flint as well. So I don't anticipate it being a problem forever. There's maybe some things that we can do on our end to like, maybe at some point we can like clear some of the memory if it's getting too long, or like give the option to do that at least. So yeah, I'll look into that. Let me know if you all like run into that a lot, and we can definitely prioritize that if that is a recurring thing.
Thank you.
Of course. Yeah, Carolyn?
Yeah, I was trying the other day, trying to do the activity with Build with Flint, and I was trying to tell it to just have an activity for oral comprehension where the student only respond with audio, and it had a hard time doing that configuration. I actually had to go to do it manually and set the activity like that. Is there a tip that you can provide so we don't have to go to Build manually and just do it all orally with the Build with Flint feature?
Interesting. That might be something that Flint can be better at, with like understanding what you're requesting. I think because in the build manually, that setting is called speaking only. So I think if you had requested Flint like make this activity speaking only, then it would have been very clear to the build with Flint. But yeah, that's maybe something that we can like do better in the programming on our side. Thank you though. Yeah. Gisela?
One of the things that I find in our school, we use iPads. And so one of the things that I find when I'm using Flint, when I have used Flint, is that if the kids don't, I'm not sure if it works on Safari, number one. They seem to be having problems connecting to it. It starts well, but then they cannot finish the actual activity that I created. And I don't know if it's because it doesn't work well on Safari and then in Google Chrome, but then when we switched to Google Chrome, seemed like it was a different situation. Do you have any idea what could be causing this glitch?
Interesting. Yeah, I'm not sure. I've seen so Flint is supposed to work on Safari. I do think it works best on Google Chrome. But there's also like various factors that could come into play here with like the network, and like if the network is blocking anything, and like yeah. So let me put this email in the chat. But if you email support@flintk12.com, if you could like send some like either screenshots or like description of what's going on to us there, then we can look more deeply into it, because it might be like a school case by case basis thing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then Lulu, you do have a few questions in the chat. May ask, does Flint retain our chat history so that we have the ability to go through previous chats?
Yeah. So with this activity builder, it doesn't yet. This is something that we want to incorporate soon, though. Yeah, I've actually been getting a lot of requests for this just over this week, so I'm definitely going to talk to our CTO about it first thing tomorrow morning. But yeah, right now, not yet. But any chats that are had with a specific activity, like in a session, those are retained. So
And
any
then
ones would be retained.
Luis asked if this is an activity for one student or for a group of students.
Yeah, so it can be either. You can share an activity with as many people as you want within your school. So I've seen teachers create activities for individual students. I've seen them create activities for just a single student or a couple students as well. Once we click create, I can show you how to like share that out. But essentially you can share the link with just the students that you want to share with, or you can share with an entire group that you want to share it with. And I think also there was Dave's question, if there are any plans to have spoken Latin and classical pronunciation. I think Flint actually right now does try to pronounce Latin, but it kind of just says it in like a English tone. It's not necessarily trained on like what Latin sounds like, unfortunately. And what we use on that end, I think, is Google translates like text to speech. So however Google Translate is with pronunciation, that's also how it would be with Latin. Okay.
Marie asked if you can upload your own rubric and have Flint use it for feedback and using the primary language.
Yeah, yes, of course. Yeah. And so, well, actually, yes, and then the second one is we're working on it, I guess. You can upload your own rubric and have Flint give feedback based on that. Especially if you have a very specific rubric, I would encourage you to upload it every time. Yeah, and then Flint will build its own grading rubric off of that and make sure that it's focusing on the same types of feedback that you want it to. And then in terms of giving feedback in the same language, it used to do this, and then I discovered today as I was playing around with it that it's now only giving feedback in English. So that's something that I've brought up with the team and we're working on. But yes, we do want it to be able to give feedback in the world language that you're teaching. Hello, Editing Lulu here. So I did find a way actually to get the feedback in Flint to be in the target language. What you need to do is change all of the settings into that language. So if you're teaching an activity in Spanish, then you need to tell Flint, change all of the settings into Spanish and make sure the feedback is in Spanish. And then that way, once all of the settings on the back end are in the target language, the feedback will also be in that target language. Our team is working on making this more intuitive, but this is how you can get around it for now. Yeah, hope that helps. Now back to the recording. Yeah, and then any plans to introduce new voice options in Flint? Yeah, this is also a very popular request. So far we've opted for accuracy over variety, I guess. So we haven't necessarily found a library of like super accurate with like a bunch of different languages, with a bunch of different like accents or voices. But if you all know of any, please send them our way and we'll investigate and see if we can add it into Flint. Yeah. Okay. And then Esther is asking, will Flint be able to create audio activities in the form of dialogues using other apps like VoiceMaker? I want to create dialogues with only audio for students to use in listening practice. Oh, so actually you can make Flint audio only as well. I'll touch on this later, but just how you can like control whether or not the student can write or speak. You can also specify whether you want Flint to speak and write or speak or write. So all of that is kind of possible. Yeah, go ahead, Esther.
Maybe I didn't explain myself. I've been doing those kinds of activities, but I don't want the kids to see the text. I want them to hear a pure dialogue. And that is not possible because it's only one voice saying the two parts of a dialogue. So I've been trying to find other apps where I can upload the dialogues created with different voices. Well, I have no luck so far, especially because they are paying apps too. So I was wondering if you're going to merge with some other technology where we write the dialogue and they create two voices, Juan and Maria, for example.
I see. Okay. Yeah. That's a good idea. We don't have that on our project timeline just yet, but I will also propose it to our team. I wonder how it would play out. I think it would also go hand in hand with can we find additional voices? But yeah,
That would be awesome.
yeah, awesome. Yes, continuing with feedback. When Flint gives areas of improvement at the end of activity, can it also create a follow-up activity based on each student's specific area of improvement? So it does suggest a follow-up activity, and this is based on the areas of improvement and also with the context of this activity, like what's a logical next activity to suggest. It doesn't automatically create those follow-ups though. The students have to go in and like click on it and create it for themselves. So if they did like click here, it would bring them into this Build with Flint panel with the context already sent in there, and then they'll just need to like finish the steps of giving there might be like some additional context that Flint asked for, and then they just need to click create activity to actually make it. Yeah. Does that?
So I have created quite a few conversations for the students to be using Flint, and has worked for the students that they were able to connect and complete it. It was great, especially in my level 2. The issue is that I can hear what they say. I can see as soon as the activity, it was only for speaking, right? So as soon as the activity is over, the good thing about it is that Flint shows me the student's response in writing. So I can actually not only listen, but to see the writing of what they said. And yes, he evaluated and he gave them areas of improvement. And I wrote more to them individually, giving them even further feedback from me, from the teacher. So, but when I ask the students, can you see my feedback? When you go back to Flint, can you see the feedback that I wrote? They tell me, no, I can only see it when I finish the task with Flint, that task that you ask us to do. And then after that, I go in it, but I can't see it. It could be in the way that I set it up, that I don't have a follow-up activity afterwards. I just want them to finish it in class and be over. But I find it interesting that they cannot see their teacher's feedback. And I think that's important too, because I'm one of those crazy ones that I actually do listen. I sit down. It's not just what the AI thinks, it's also what I think.
Interesting.
They can't see my feedback because there's an opportunity for you right there where you see it. You click on the little, and you can actually add more feedback to them. And sometimes the AI, because my level 2 is supposed to be like intermediate low, but there's some things in intermediate low they can still not do yet. So of course I need to go in there because the AI went too advanced for them. So I tell them, oh no, you didn't do as, I changed their grade given by AI. I gave them my feedback, and they say they cannot see what I did afterwards, after it closes, I mean. Can you tell me why?
Yeah, they should be able to see it when they return to that session. So maybe it's a matter of they're going to maybe the overview page, but not going to their individual session. But if they come back to this screen, then it should display here. But I do think that's something that we can maybe do better in terms of just if you add feedback, maybe the student should get an email about what that feedback is and then brings them here. Just like make it a lot simpler for them,
No, but I think you're right. I think they're going to the wrong spot when they go to Flint. They just go to the main page. They're not looking. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, and then Anna is asking, does Flint have any plans to pair with language textbooks and make activities that match up with textbook lessons? So we don't have any plans to pair with specific textbooks yet, but what you could do right now is if you have like the online textbook, you could upload PDFs from it, or if the link is public, which they might not be for a textbook, but you could like add the link to it as well. Yeah, and because Flint, anything that you put into Flint, both from the sessions or the activity setup, it's all securely kept just within that activity. So we're not sending back any of the information that you're uploading, any of the content. So there's not like a privacy concern or a copyright concern for adding that into your activity, since it's just using it for the students learning in this specific activity. Kind of a long-winded answer, but you could upload PDFs from your textbook and then ask it to build off of that. But yeah, it might be interesting to see if we can integrate that more seamlessly into the experience later on. Great, awesome. Yeah, thanks, Sandra. Okay, so let me continue again in the interest of time. I do have quite a few more slides to get through, but yeah, here's like a quick list that I came up with like different activity types that can be done with world language. And I think of all of the subjects that I work with, world language truly has like endless opportunities here, from like conversation role plays, listening or reading comprehension. One that I've seen a lot more recently is describing a picture also, because I know that's like sometimes something that you have to do on like AP tests or like IB exams and stuff. But yeah, vocabulary practice, oral presentations, quiz on content, debates, interviews, etc. We have an entire template library within Flint. Let me grab the link for that really quick for you all to see. But within the template library, you can see some examples that teachers have published of activities that they've made and really enjoyed. So these 4 on the right-hand side here are some templates that I found interesting, like this train journey from DC to New York with unexpected delays and a dining car expedition. This one's like describing this picture from, oh, I think I went to the next one. Okay. This one is describing a picture from a protest in France about equal rights. This one, the students are pretending to be in an ancient Roman classroom, so practicing Latin in that sort of scenario. And then here's an entire conversation about different Chinese philosophers from different time periods who had different ideas on life and how to be a person and whatnot. So yeah, there's like a lot of variety there. I would encourage you to check out the templates if you're kind of feeling uninspired. It's a great place to go look for new ideas from other teachers using Flint. And then also I included this slide in here too about when in an activity or in class or in a lesson Flint could be used. And I've heard a lot about like bell ringers or warm-ups for Flint, especially for language classes, just getting students like in the mode of talking in that language, speaking in general, and yeah, having them just hop into Flint for like a quick 5 minutes just to do a quick activity and kind of review maybe the vocabulary or the content that they were supposed to look at the night before. But yeah, you can also use Flint for new concepts, for introducing them, or giving project feedback or having students do research, individualized discussion like we've talked a lot about so far, but also review in that aspect, and also independent study and tutoring. I've been seeing a lot more teachers like being comfortable with the idea of students creating their own activities for themselves and like figuring out what they themselves need to practice. And sometimes even the assignment could be that the students have to create an activity for their peers. So that's also been a cool use of Flint that I've seen recently. Yeah. Okay. And then, yeah, let me quickly do this tips for activity setup. I know this was asked about earlier, but yeah, features to note. So within the Flint settings, I'll just show you really quickly here. You can do everything with Build with Flint, or I guess with the caveat of like the wording might need to be specific sometimes. But also in Build Manually, that's where you can see all of the different settings that are being added. For you all, the most relevant one here would be within these language settings, where we have the primary language, secondary languages, how students are communicating, how Flint's communicating, and also a speaking rate. So yeah, here you can choose between 50 plus different languages, and then for some of the high resource languages have the different dialects or accents from different areas of the world. And then for a secondary language, this is where you could add English, or there's also the option to select all languages. I know we might have a couple or many teachers from like international schools here. So if you select all languages, then your students could use like their own native language as well in the activity if they need help in any way. But yeah, and then here's where you can set up student communication to be like speaking only or writing only. You can restrict it to one way or the other. And then also Flint's communication. Yeah, so here if you have Flint be speaking only, then when you start the session, students will get this button where they have to like play it to listen to it, and then it won't display the text. Yeah. And then also, yeah, like I kind of mentioned earlier, there's like the ACTFL and the CFR levels that you can reference, but also grade levels. And just like making sure to specify that will help level the experience for the students. AI does tend to go on the more complicated end, so it's important to like bring it down a notch. And also like if it's not quite as simple as you need it to be, you can also just like bring it down more, and students won't necessarily know that you're setting them at like a grade 6 when they're actually in grade 8. So yeah. But yeah, any of these things, also content upload, all of that can be done in the builder chat, and it's just like the easiest way to do it. I think like over time you might get familiar with the different settings and everything, but the builder chat will also make sure that you don't have settings that are contradicting each other, because every time it adds something new, it references how it fits into the bigger picture. So it is just easier to use the chat in my experience, at least. Yeah, and then a couple notes on adjusting behavior and feedback of Flint. Yeah, like I said earlier, AI tends to be more helpful. So if you want it to be restrictive in the topics that it's covering with students, or also how it's giving feedback to students, you need to be specific and explicit with the sort of behavior that you want. So for example, you can say like, only give hints in French, never use English with the student, or if the student gets something wrong, make them try again. So you can give it like very specific prompts like that, and it will try its best to follow that at least. And then, yeah, or something that you can also say is increase the difficulty of sentences as students get answers right. And I think that's kind of like one of the exciting things about AI is that it can respond dynamically over the course of the conversation. So you can make it like get harder as they're doing well, or make it easier if they're kind of struggling. And students can also advocate for themselves in the session, and that's like something we can train them on. Like if they get stuck on something, they're like, oh, I don't know that vocabulary word. They can just tell Flint, and then Flint can say, oh, this is what this means. Now, do you understand? And really like instead of the student just sitting there stuck with a sheet of paper or something, with the AI, it can be really a lot more engaging, and students can have their needs met in the moment. But yeah, the last point here is that the complexity of the feedback will also reflect the complexity of the rubric. So when it comes to that like final feedback that the students get, if you want it to be hyper specific to how you would give feedback, this is where I would say like, yeah, adding your own rubric in would be best. But also you might just want to like check there, or even ask the builder chat like, hey, what are you looking out for when you're giving students feedback? And it will be able to specify like, oh, I'm looking at sentence structure and grammar. Or on the flip side, it might be, oh, I'm looking at like argumentation and like how well they're using their sources to back up a debate or something like that. So yeah, the feedback that it gives is highly dependent on the rubric, is basically what I'm trying to say there. Great. So I think those were all the slides that I had. You'll ask a lot of good questions. Let me check the. Okay, so Anna's
Anna has
asking.
a question. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so Anna's asking, could you explain the resources Flint draws on to set language levels? Like when you say they are an A1 learner, what does Flint use to determine that content? The content it uses subsequently. So we haven't done too much prompting on that end actually, but Flint has the context of like the CEFR system and the ACTFL system, and so it just goes off of those guidelines. The guidelines are like online, so Flint is able to draw from that and use that as like the base of what it's building off of. So sometimes it's like kind of working for your students, sometimes it might not be. So that's where like if you can be more specific about how students are doing, like if you give Flint like an example of student work, or if you give Flint like more feedback basically about like bring it down a notch or bring it up a notch, that can help a lot. So that's where like previewing it comes in handy. Yeah, Gisela?
Okay, so I would say on my end, with the rubric that we use in the school where I am, one of the best things, like you said, that I did, which worked, was, for example, my students in one level, when I started doing the practicing, because I like doing the simulation, just to see the preview, I noticed that it was using certain grammar structures that they have seen, but I'm not expecting them to be able to use them when speaking. So I instructed the AI, Flint, to not use that structure, not expect the students to use that structure, to focus in the preterite versus imperfect. I gave it the structures that I wanted them to, and then I said, you can definitely use it in questions, but do not expect the students to use it. And once it did the change the way I want it, and I did it again, it was great because they could hear the question, ¿y qué pasó, qué ha pasado con fulano de tal? Like what happened or what was it that happened using the present perfect. In Spanish, and the question was fine, but the students were not expected to use it. So you definitely need to be very specific, because otherwise then it becomes too challenging. But I like the idea of what you showed, that if some students do get ahead and they do perform better, so if you see a student using it, by all means, go nuts. So that's good. I'm going to do that the next time I create the activity.
Awesome. Yeah, love to hear it. Yeah, and Sophie, for sure. I've heard a couple times, the request for HSK levels. I think you could actually ask the builder chat to reference HSK levels when it's creating that activity. It should, like Flint in general should have knowledge of some HSK levels, and even if not, maybe there's like a guide online that you can upload there and have it reference that. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So when I was trying and when I was sharing with the other Chinese teachers in my school, so yeah, my personal experience is that yes, I could just type HSK levels in that bar, or I could just like in my instructions, I could just put HSK 3. But the reason I bring up this to add it in the drop-down menu, like a European framework or the ACT4, is that many of the Chinese teachers, if they do not see it in the drop-down menu, they have no knowledge. They are able to type HSK.
Yeah.
That's why I bring this up.
For sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and Carolyn asked, can you change the settings of an activity if you've already shared it with students? Oh, and students started it. So yes, you can. You can change it at any point, but the new settings will only apply to new messages and new sessions with the activity. So it won't go back and like reevaluate old sessions or like or like change the topic. Yeah, so yes, but it will only like work from then and forward. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I had tried to leave some time for sharing out, but you all just had so many great questions. I know I had actually invited Tristan Ming from Malvern College in Hong Kong to kind of share what he had been using Flint for. But yeah, and then afterwards, happy to hear other examples from people as well. But yeah, we want to make these sessions as much of you all learning from our team as you all learning from each other. Yeah.
Hi, Lulu. Yeah. Good morning.
Yeah. Hi.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Tristan Mi from Melbourne College, Hong Kong. So I'm here to simply share. Our team has been briefly using Flint, like the teacher mentioned previously, using Flint to do some character learning and scaffolding sentence making. And the one thing I found recently, it's really interesting is we introduced some books, like picture books, and I use the picture books, I create some digital humans. For example, the human from a long time ago, and I use Flint to make a chatbot. I asked my student to chat with the character from the books and to help them to develop some critical thinkings. And afterwards, we can also, after the whole unit finish, we can also using Flint to co-create some rubrics with students. And I really like that feature because we can gather the data very quick. And also it's provided a safe area for both teacher and student. We can reflect on what we've been doing and what we can improve on next. And I can always revise on my rubrics. I'll always revise on my prompts to Flint. Yeah.
Yeah. I really love that actually. Yeah, I know some teachers are like, especially with AI, it feels a little bit like me versus student versus AI, right? But there's some schools even who have been creating student committees for setting up the school's AI policy and like figuring out what guidelines should be in general for AI usage. And we've seen that like, the students are also very thoughtful of this. They're like, a lot of polls have shown like, oh, students know that just using AI to shortcut their learning isn't good for them. So I really like, Tristan, that you're sharing like that you're able to, work with the students to create better experiences for them. That's really cool. Yeah. Let's see. Oh yeah, and then really quickly to touch on what Sandra's asking, I noticed that during the activity building process, Flint cannot save the interaction if you leave it for another day. Can this be added in the future? Yeah, so I would just suggest that you just create the activity. When you create it, it's just going to be in your homepage. It's not going to directly get shared with any students. So that will like save it at that current state, but unfortunately, yeah, it'll lose the chat history that you had with it, but that is something that we want to add soon. But yeah, if you're like in the middle of something, I would just create it and then you can always go back and add on to it and change it later. Yeah, we have 1 more minute left. I do want to I have time to stay on if more people want to share what they're doing with Flint, but let me just quickly wrap up in case there is anyone who needs to leave. Yeah, so we do have 2 more sessions coming up. These might not be as relevant to you all, but just want to let you all know. There are sessions about once a week, but the next one is on crafting AI policies. And we've been talking to a lot of schools that are, at various stages of this process. So wanted to have a session on that. And then 2 weeks from now, we have a session on college and career counseling, using Flint for that. Actually, there was even a Spanish teacher that I talked to who said that he had created an activity that was super successful with his students where they had to describe what they wanted as a future career in Spanish. So in some ways that could be relevant, but yeah, that was kind of cool. But yeah, in terms of like, if you want to connect with more teachers using Flint, we do have this Facebook group. And like our team is pretty active in it. Other teachers are also pretty active in it. So if there's like ideas that you're wanting to see if people have tried or like advice that you want from other teachers and not just our team, that's a great place to go. But yeah, yeah, I'll post the recording on our website, but I'll also send it out to all of you directly. So that is everything. I'll leave that there for anyone who needs it. Yeah, is there anyone else who wants to share how they've been using Flint, or are there any other questions for me also? Oh, I see that there might be some in the chat. Oh yeah, Dion says he would suggest doing a session as a student after you create it so you can see exactly what students will see. That I also highly recommend. Honestly, I feel like, of course, there's like the time constraint, but some testing of an activity is pretty important. And also you can maybe set the expectation well for students, like, hey, if this is like the first activity they're trying, like, hey, AI can make mistakes sometimes. AI doesn't know all of the context about you. So, like, if anything pops up or something, like, just talk to me about it and treat it as an experiment almost. I've seen a lot of teachers do that for like the first experience with Flint in the classroom. And Anita is asking if anyone has any hints for having AI only use kanji that students have learned. Okay. Yeah, I think because Flint can kind of communicate in like more than one language, if you had a list of the kanji characters that students know and you uploaded that in and say, hey, just stick to these, it might be able to stick pretty closely to that. Yeah, and then I think the fallback for it would be like using English or what other language as the students are going through that activity. Oh yeah, Sophie said that. Thanks, Sophie. Great. Awesome. Yeah, thank you all for your time. If there's more questions or examples, I can catch them all in the recording. Otherwise, hope you all are having a good day, morning, night, wherever it is you are.
Lulu, thank you so much. You were amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Yes, thank you so much. Mainly rain, a little bit of snow down for me.
Thank you.
Thank you.